The hum in Ms. Davison's 7th grade math class at Northwood Middle School on that slightly dreary Tuesday morning wasn't just the low thrum of the fluorescent lights or the occasional rustle of papers. It was the quiet, almost imperceptible drone of routine, of unspoken expectations, and of a school operating within its own subtle biases. Northwood itself was a sturdy, red-brick building in a diverse, working-class neighborhood, a place where potential often lay hidden beneath layers of circumstance and stereotype. At the back, near the window, sat Jamal. He was a quiet, observant 7th grader, his lean frame often hunched slightly over his desk, as if trying to blend into the worn laminate. To most of his teachers, including Ms. Davison, Jamal was simply average, a polite kid who rarely caused trouble but also rarely engaged. He didn't raise his hand often, didn't volunteer answers, and seemed to prefer the background. What they couldn't see, was the quiet intensity in his eyes as he absorbed information, not always through the traditional pathways, but through a unique, intuitive lens. Jamal grappled with an undiagnosed learning difference that made reading comprehension a frustrating chore. Words on a page sometimes swam, making him appear slower than he was in a system that prioritized written assignments and verbal participation. Yet, beneath that surface, Jamal possessed a brilliant, almost visceral understanding of numbers, patterns, and logic. His true passion lay in the rhythmic hum of his own projects. Their small apartment, shared with his grandmother Maria, who worked long, tiring shifts at the local hospital, often smelled faintly of solder and old circuit boards. Jamal spent hours in his room, meticulously taking apart discarded radios, broken VCRs, anything with wires and gears. He'd spend just as long putting them back together, or creating something entirely new, his fingers nimble, his mind tracing the invisible pathways of electricity and function. He saw the world in systems, in interconnected parts, and found a profound comfort in the predictability of mathematical and mechanical principles. There was a quiet frustration in being constantly misunderstood, a dull ache of unrecognized ability, but Jamal had learned long ago that it was easier to keep his true brilliance hidden. Leading the class, with his back mostly to Jamal, was Mr. Harrison. A veteran math teacher, Mr. Harrison had been at Northwood for over 20 years. On the surface, he was affable, prone to a booming laugh and theatrical gestures at the whiteboard. But beneath that seemingly genial exterior lay subtle, deeply ingrained biases. He held firm beliefs about innate abilities, often categorizing students early on based on their backgrounds, their perceived academic family histories, or even just a gut feeling. He was quick to dismiss those he deemed unlikely to succeed, often unconsciously. Mr. Harrison enjoyed making light-hearted jokes at his students' expense, especially those he perceived as less capable. He saw it as a way to lighten the mood or motivate them, unaware of the quiet sting of humiliation he inflicted. To him, Jamal was merely a checkmark on his attendance roster, another face in the sea of adolescence, certainly not a budding mathematician. Today, Mr. Harrison was reviewing a problem from the previous night's homework, an algebraic equation that involved simple substitution. He scribbled on the whiteboard, explaining each step with his usual flourish. He had a habit, known well among his students, of keeping a particular, notoriously difficult problem up his sleeve. It was from a higher-grade textbook, an advanced algebra problem involving multiple variables and complex fractions, or perhaps a tricky geometry proof that required abstract spatial reasoning. He pulled it out when he wanted to challenge a student, or more often, when he wanted to subtly put someone in their place. They called it Harrison's impossible problem. It was a trap, a public display designed to expose what Mr. Harrison believed was a student's intellectual ceiling. He had no idea just how dramatically and unexpectedly that particular joke was about to redefine everything he thought he knew. The rhythmic scratch of Mr. Harrison's chalk on the whiteboard paused. He was explaining a basic algebraic substitution, meticulously writing out each step. "Now if x equals 3, class, what's our solution?" he boomed, turning to survey the room. A scattering of hands went up, the usual eager few. Jamal, however, was already 2 pages ahead in his textbook. His mind, unburdened by the slow, linear progression of the lesson, had quickly spotted a more elegant, almost intuitive shortcut for the problem Mr. Harrison was explaining. It was a simpler way to arrive at the answer, requiring fewer steps. A quiet wave of frustration, familiar yet persistent, washed over him. He knew the answer, and he knew a better way to get there. Against his usual habit, and almost impulsively, he raised his hand. Mr. Harrison's eyes, scanning the room, snagged on Jamal's raised hand. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Jamal rarely participated, and when he did, it often felt like an interruption. "Yes, Jamal?" he asked, his tone laced with a hint of impatience. "Do you have a question about step 2? "No, Mr. Harrison," Jamal said quietly, his voice barely audible above the classroom's low hum. I saw a different way to solve it. It's quicker." A smirk, slow and condescending, spread across Mr. Harrison's face. "Quicker?" he thought. "This kid who barely turns in his homework on time thinks he's found a shortcut to my carefully taught methods?" An idea, sharp and mean-spirited, struck him. It was the perfect opportunity to put Jamal back in his perceived place, to remind him of the classroom hierarchy. He strode to his desk, pulling out a thick advanced textbook, one from the honors track, 2 grades above their current level. He flipped through it, a theatrical sigh escaping his lips. "All right, Jamal," he said, turning back to the class, his voice carrying a performative lightness that barely masked the underlying mockery. "Since you're so far ahead, why don't you try solving this one for the class?" He uncapped a black marker and scrawled a complex problem on the pristine white section of the board, directly next to the simple equation he'd just solved. It was Harrison's impossible problem, a multivariable algebraic beast interwoven with elements of geometry, designed to humble even the brightest high schoolers. Given a rectangle ABCD with area 180 units 2 and perimeter 54 units, a diagonal AC divides the rectangle into 2 triangles. If a point E is on AC such that AE, EC is out 2, 3, and a line is drawn from B through E to intersect AD at F and CD at G. Find the area of triangle AEF. Mr. Harrison turned from the board, arms crossed, a knowing glint in his eye. He fully expected Jamal to stare blankly, to stammer, to finally admit defeat and retreat to his usual quiet corner. "Let's see if our little genius can handle this," he muttered, loud enough for the first few rows to hear, a few nervous giggles rippling through the class. Jamal felt the familiar sting of dismissal, the casual cruelty of being underestimated. It was a feeling he knew well, a dull ache that usually prompted him to shrink further into himself. But this time, something else sparked within him, a quiet defiance. He looked at the problem and, unlike the scrambled words of a history textbook, the numbers, the variables, the geometric shapes on the board spoke to him in a language he understood intrinsically. He didn't see a joke. He saw a challenge, a fascinating puzzle to unlock. His mind, unburdened by the typical step-by-step formulaic approach Mr. Harrison taught, instinctively visualized the problem. He saw the rectangle, the diagonal, the intersecting line, not as abstract concepts, but as interconnected parts, like the components of an old radio. His brain bypassed the long, arduous calculations, seeing shortcuts, elegant pathways, recognizing patterns that others might miss. The pressure in the room was palpable, a tangible weight, but for Jamal, it simply sharpened his focus. The other students in the class shifted uncomfortably. They knew Harrison's impossible problem was a trap, a public spectacle. Some felt pity for Jamal, others a sense of uncomfortable anticipation, hoping he wouldn't make a fool of himself. They expected him to stumble, to admit defeat. Mr. Harrison pulled out his phone, ostentatiously setting a timer for 2 minutes. "All right, Jamal," he announced, his voice oozing mock patience. 2 minutes. Go on. Show the class how a real genius solves problems." He leaned against his desk, tapping his foot, clearly expecting a quick, humiliating failure. The seconds ticked by, each one amplifying the silence, stretching the tension in the room to its breaking point. Jamal pushed his chair back, the scrape of plastic on linoleum cutting through the quiet. He walked to the whiteboard, picked up a piece of chalk, and turned to face Harrison's impossible problem. He felt the eyes of every student and the piercing gaze of Mr. Harrison on his back. But in that moment, All that mattered was the intricate dance of numbers and shapes before him, waiting to be untangled. The air in the classroom thickened, heavy with the weight of expectation and Mr. Harrison's thinly veiled mockery. Jamal, with the chalk cool and smooth in his hand, stood before Harrison's impossible problem. He felt the 100 eyes on him, the silent challenge. Yet the usual pressure to perform, the anxiety of being put on the spot, receded. All that mattered was the intricate puzzle on the board. He didn't start with the typical algebraic setup, the laborious isolating of variables that Mr. Harrison drilled into them. Instead, Jamal's mind, unburdened by conventional methods, saw the problem in its entirety, like a blueprint of a complex circuit board. He saw the rectangle, the diagonal, the intersecting lines not as separate elements, but as interlinked pathways of information. His intuition, honed by years of tinkering with discarded electronics, immediately recognized the underlying geometric relationships, the symmetries, the proportionalities that simplified the entire structure. Jamal began to write. He drew a quick, clean diagram of the rectangle, precisely sketching the diagonal AC and the line beg. Then, instead of setting up a lengthy system of equations for the area and perimeter, he intuitively visualized the dimensions. His mind, unchained by the need for explicit calculation, recognized that a rectangle with an area of 180 and a perimeter of 54 must have sides of 15 and 12 units. He wrote these dimensions directly on his diagram, a shortcut that bypassed several steps Mr. Harrison would have demanded. Next, he focused on the point E on AC, where AEEC shackled 2.3. He didn't use the distance formula. He saw it as a ratio, a division of the diagonal into 5 parts. He then drew a dotted line from E parallel to AB and another parallel to AD. These weren't standard steps for a 7th grader, but they were the keys to unlocking the problem's geometric relationships. He used the concept of similar triangles, a topic technically beyond their grade level, but a principle his mind grasped instinctively. He could see how the line beg divided the larger triangles into smaller, proportional ones. Mr. Harrison's arms remained crossed, but his foot, which had been tapping impatiently, slowly stilled. His initial smirk had wavered the moment Jamal started drawing the precise diagram, then vanished entirely as Jamal wrote 15 and 12 directly onto the sides of the rectangle without any visible calculation. Confusion flickered across his face. He leaned closer to the board, his brow furrowed, trying to follow Jamal's unconventional steps. Jamal's chalk moved with a quiet, confident grace. He wrote down relationships between the areas of the triangles, using the proportionality of their bases and heights. He didn't explain his reasoning aloud. He simply showed it, each line of chalk a self-evident truth. He was demonstrating a higher-level understanding, a synthesis of concepts that Mr. Harrison hadn't even introduced. The other students, initially prepared for a train wreck, now leaned forward, their expressions shifting from pity to genuine awe. Whispers rippled through the rows. "What is he doing?" And, Is that right?" They watched, mesmerized, as Jamal filled the board not with confused scribbles, but with elegant lines, concise labels, and a clear, undeniable progression towards a solution. He bypassed the complex algebraic solution for the intersection point of beg entirely, instead using the property of a Sevian dividing a triangle, a theorem usually introduced in advanced high school geometry. Finally, Jamal wrote the last line, area of triangle AEF. 5. 36 units. 2 or 7.2 units 2. He placed the chalk down, the faint click echoing in the sudden profound silence of the room. He turned, his gaze quiet and steady, meeting Mr. Harrison's stunned eyes. The breath-holding moment stretched. Mr. Harrison stared at the board, then at Jamal, then back at the board, his face draining of all color. He reread Jamal's work, tracing the lines of chalk with an almost frantic intensity. He looked for a mistake, a computational error, a logical flaw, anything that would invalidate this impossible answer. But there was none. The answer was undeniably, unequivocally correct. The method, while unorthodox, was mathematically sound, a pure display of geometric intuition. His carefully cultivated image of intellectual superiority, his authority, his very understanding of who was smart and who wasn't, was crumbling. The joke had not only backfired, it had obliterated his assumptions, exposing his own deeply ingrained biases. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mr. Harrison's shoulders slumped. His mouth, which had been agape, closed slowly. He looked at Jamal, a flicker of shock, humiliation, and a reluctant, dawning respect warring in his eyes. His voice, usually booming, was barely a whisper, thin and reedy in the silent room. That's correct, Jamal," he mumbled, his gaze falling to the floor, unable to meet the boy's steady stare. He tried to compose himself, to dismiss Jamal, to move on as if nothing monumental had just happened. But the moment had been altered forever. Jamal, the quiet observer, the overlooked student, had just unveiled an unseen genius, proving himself a mathematical prodigy in the most unexpected and public way imaginable. The silence in the classroom, thick with the aftermath of Jamal's impossible feat, was eventually broken by the hesitant shuffling of chairs. Mr. Harrison, still reeling, tried to regain control, but his authority felt shattered. He mumbled something about reviewing the previous day's lesson, his usual booming voice reduced to a reedy whisper. The students, however, weren't listening. Their eyes kept darting to Jamal, then to the precise, unconventional solution still emblazoned on the whiteboard. The quiet kid in the back row had just performed a magic trick, and no one knew quite how to react. For Mr. Harrison, the incident became a haunting echo. He tried to dismiss it, to tell himself it was a fluke, a lucky guess, or even a pre-prepared trick. But the elegance of Jamal's solution, the sheer intuitive leap it represented, gnawed at him. He found himself replaying the moment in his mind. Jamal's quiet confidence, the unexpected pathways drawn on the board, the undeniably correct answer. He started to notice things he'd overlooked before. How Jamal would often finish his work early and then simply sit, observing. How his eyes would track patterns on the classroom clock, or the subtle geometric designs in the ceiling tiles. The carefully constructed wall of his biases began to crack. He had always believed in a certain type of intelligence, a linear, textbook-defined brilliance that he himself embodied. Jamal didn't fit that mold. The incident forced Mr. Harrison to confront the uncomfortable truth. He had been wrong, terribly wrong. And in his arrogance, he might have overlooked, or worse, actively stifled, countless other talents in his 2 decades of teaching. This was the painful, disorienting start of his redemption arc, a journey he didn't know he was on, but one that would fundamentally change him. For Jamal, the shift was more subtle, but profoundly impactful. He was still quiet, still preferred to observe. But the triumph, the undeniable proof of his abilities, ignited a quiet confidence within him. The familiar sting of being underestimated lessened, replaced by a nascent pride. In the days that followed, the dynamics in the classroom began to change. Students who had once ignored him now approached him, tentatively at first, then more boldly, asking for help with difficult problems. His explanations, though sometimes unorthodox, were clear and insightful. He found himself drawn into small groups, a quiet leader among his peers, no longer invisible. His grandmother, Maria, a woman whose life had been a testament to quiet resilience, noticed the change first. Jamal walked with a straighter spine, his eyes held a new spark, and he even hummed softly as he tinkered with his electronics, a melody of contented focus. He started talking about the math problems he was solving, not just the electronics. Maria, with her innate wisdom, knew something significant had shifted. She saw the true potential that had always been there, now finally beginning to shine. The story of Harrison's impossible problem didn't stay confined to Mr. Harrison's classroom for long. Whispers turned into excited accounts. Ms. Davison, Jamal's homeroom teacher, heard the buzz. Intrigued, she discreetly observed Jamal in math class, watching his focused intensity, his almost tactile interaction with numbers. She saw the same quiet brilliance that Maria had seen at home. The school principal, Ms. Albright, a forward-thinking educator committed to fostering every student's potential, eventually heard the full, astonishing account. She knew Mr. Harrison well, understood his old-school approach, and recognized the profound shift that must have occurred for him to even acknowledge such an unexpected talent. Ms. Albright, seeing beyond the single incident, recognized a larger opportunity. Jamal wasn't just a math whiz. He possessed a unique way of thinking, a natural gift for abstract problem solving that went beyond rote memorization. She connected this to his quiet nature, his struggles with reading, and his undeniable passion for building and fixing things. A few weeks after the incident, Ms. Albright called a meeting. Not a disciplinary one, but an exploratory one. Jamal and his grandmother, Maria, were invited to her office, along with Ms. Davison and, somewhat reluctantly, Mr. Harrison. The atmosphere was different from the classroom, formal yet hopeful. Ms. Albright spoke of Jamal's exceptional aptitude, his unconventional problem-solving skills. She outlined possibilities, a specialized math competition, an accelerated gifted program at a neighboring high school known for its STEM focus, or even an outreach program at a local university that sought out promising young minds. Mr. Harrison surprisingly spoke up, not to dismiss, but to corroborate. His voice still held a hint of awe. Jamal's approach. It was unlike anything I've ever seen. He didn't just solve the problem. He understood it in a way that most adults don't. He sees the whole system. His words, delivered without a trace of his former condescension, were a powerful endorsement. It was the first, tangible step in his long road to redemption, a public acknowledgement that he had learned a humbling, life-altering lesson. The seeds of change had been sown, not just in Jamal's life, but in the very fabric of Northwood Middle School. The principal's office, usually a place of stern reprimands or formal pronouncements, hummed with an unusual atmosphere, a blend of cautious optimism and genuine curiosity. Maria, Jamal's grandmother, sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his knee, her eyes watchful and hopeful. Across the desk, Ms. Albright, the principal, smiled kindly, while Ms. Davison offered reassuring nods. Even Mr. Harrison, looking notably subdued, occasionally offered a hesitant, almost respectful glance towards Jamal. The stark contrast to his classroom persona was palpable. "Jamal," Ms. Albright began, her voice warm, "we've been discussing your unique abilities in mathematics. Mr. Harrison has provided a compelling account of what happened in class, and Ms. Davison has noticed your quiet brilliance as well." She explained that the school had resources, not just for academic struggles, but also for identifying and nurturing exceptional talents. "We'd like to arrange for some specialized assessments, not to test you, but to understand how you learn, how your mind processes information. It could help us find the best ways to support you." Jamal, usually reticent, felt a strange sense of relief. He nodded. "Okay," he murmured, his voice a little stronger than usual. A few weeks later, the assessments were complete. The results were revelatory, a puzzle piece slotting perfectly into place. Jamal was diagnosed with a learning difference related to reading comprehension and information processing, specifically a form of dyslexia and auditory processing disorder. This explained his struggles with traditional classroom assignments, the way words sometimes swam on the page, and why he often appeared disengaged. But the assessments also powerfully confirmed his extraordinary cognitive strengths, an innate, highly developed spatial reasoning, exceptional pattern recognition, and a profound intuitive grasp of complex mathematical concepts. His brain simply processed information differently, seeing the underlying logic and structure of numbers and systems with remarkable clarity, bypassing the linear pathways that often tripped him up with words. The diagnosis was a watershed moment. For Jamal, it was a profound relief, an explanation that validated his intelligence instead of questioning it. He wasn't slow, his brain just worked on a different, often more advanced frequency. For Maria, it was vindication. She'd always known her grandson was special, but now there was a name for his unique brilliance. For the school, it was a crucial insight, illuminating the path forward. This secret seed of mystery, the undiagnosed learning difference, now explained why such a brilliant mind had been previously overlooked, hidden in plain sight. Ms. Albright, energized by the findings, had already reached out. She had connections at the local university, a prestigious institution known for its cutting-edge STEM programs. One name came up repeatedly: Dr. Eris Thorne, a renowned mathematician and an advocate for neurodiversity in STEM fields. Dr. Thorne was known for his unconventional teaching methods and his passion for identifying untapped potential. A meeting was arranged. Dr. Thorne, a man with kind eyes and an unruly shock of white hair, spent an hour with Jamal, not lecturing, but asking him questions about how he saw numbers, how he solved puzzles, how he imagined complex systems. Jamal, for the first time, felt truly seen, truly understood. He spoke animatedly about the architecture of numbers, about building solutions like circuits. Dr. Thorne listened, captivated. "Jamal," Dr. Thorne said at the end of their conversation, his voice filled with genuine excitement, "your mind doesn't just calculate, it visualizes the very essence of mathematics. This isn't a disability, it's a superpower." He offered Jamal an unparalleled, meaningful new opportunity. A place in the university's accelerated youth program, specifically designed for students with exceptional mathematical and scientific aptitude. It was a tailored curriculum focusing on advanced concepts while providing specialized support for his learning difference. It included a full scholarship, ensuring that financial barriers would never stand in his way. This was more than just a school program. It was a direct pathway to his potential, a future unlocked, and Mr. Harrison's redemption continued to unfold. Deeply affected by Jamal's diagnosis and the undeniable proof of his genius, he began to actively seek to make amends. He approached Maria privately, offering a sincere, albeit awkward, apology for his past dismissiveness. "I was wrong, Maria," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "I let my own prejudices blind me. Jamal is extraordinary, and I owe him and every student I might have misjudged a debt." In the classroom, Mr. Harrison underwent a profound transformation. He became an ardent advocate for individualized learning, for looking beyond test scores and traditional metrics. He revamped his teaching methods, incorporating more visual aids, hands-on activities, and problem-solving techniques that encourage diverse approaches. He started a Problem of the Week board, featuring challenging open-ended questions, and actively encouraged students to share their unique methods, just like Jamal had. He even created a small wall of fame in his classroom, showcasing the achievements of former students and prominently featuring Jamal's impossible problem solution, carefully preserved and annotated, not as a source of shame, but as a humbling testament to the power of unseen brilliance. Mr. Harrison began to follow Jamal's progress with genuine, almost paternal pride, a quiet supporter who had learned the hardest, most valuable lesson of his career. The once rigid teacher was now a changed man, proof that even the most ingrained biases could be challenged, confronted, and ultimately overcome. The years that followed Jamal's pivotal diagnosis and the discovery of his profound mathematical intuition were a testament to the transformative power of recognition and tailored opportunity. The scholarship from the university, orchestrated by Dr. Thorne, wasn't just a financial aid package. It was an open door to a world that had once seemed utterly inaccessible. Jamal, with his quiet intensity and intuitive grasp of complex systems, thrived. He didn't just excel in his advanced math courses. He found his true calling in the intricate logic of computer science and artificial intelligence. His mind, which had once seen the simple elegance in a geometry problem, now devoured algorithms and coding languages, seeing them not as abstract commands, but as the underlying architecture of new realities. Dr. Thorne, recognizing Jamal's unique way of thinking, became more than a professor. He was a true mentor, guiding Jamal through advanced topics, encouraging his unconventional approaches, and shielding him from any lingering skepticism from more traditional academics. He understood that Jamal's brilliance lay in his ability to visualize solutions, to intuitively feel the right pathway through a labyrinth of data, long before he could formally prove it. Jamal's name began to circulate, first within the university, then in broader academic circles. He wasn't just solving problems, he was simplifying them, finding elegant shortcuts that baffled seasoned researchers. He participated in and consistently won national, then international, math and science competitions. His projects, often combining theoretical mathematics with practical applications in AI, garnered attention for their innovative and often groundbreaking approaches. He published his first research paper on a novel approach to optimizing complex algorithms, drawing praise for its clarity and originality. He was no longer just a kid who had solved a joke problem. He was a burgeoning prodigy, a rising star whose unique perspective promised to redefine the boundaries of his chosen fields. Back at Northwood Middle School, Mr. Harrison had completed his own quiet but profound transformation. The incident with Jamal had been a mirror, forcing him to confront decades of unconscious bias. He had become an entirely different kind of teacher. His classroom, once a place of rigid instruction, now buzzed with collaborative energy. He encouraged students to share their unique problem-solving methods, celebrating diverse approaches rather than insisting on a single prescribed path. He still used Harrison's impossible problem as a challenge, but now it was a genuine invitation to innovation, a testament to the unexpected brilliance he had learned to seek out. He had started a new math and logic club, fostering critical thinking and creative problem-solving. On a prominent wall in his classroom hung a wall of innovators, featuring photos and achievements of former students who had gone on to do remarkable things. Among them, a slightly faded newspaper clipping of Jamal, a younger version with thick glasses and a determined look, held pride of place, a constant, humbling reminder of the day his own assumptions were shattered by a seventh grader. Mr. Harrison often shared Jamal's story, not as a source of personal shame, but as a powerful lesson in humility and the endless, often hidden potential of every student. He was a changed man, and his legacy as an educator was now defined by his ability to see beyond the obvious, to nurture the unseen. Jamal, even amidst his burgeoning academic career, never forgot where he came from. He maintained regular contact with Dr. Thorne, his mentor, but also made a point to visit his grandmother, Maria, often, sharing his progress and his latest discoveries. He even exchanged occasional, respectful emails with Mr. Harrison, who tracked his former students' ascent with a quiet, paternal pride. Jamal knew that his journey had started with a challenge, a dismissive joke, but it had blossomed because someone, eventually, chose to see him, not for what he seemed to be, but for the profound potential he truly held. He was well on his way to becoming an architect of knowledge, his brilliance no longer unseen. 5 years later, the name Jamal resonated far beyond the quiet halls of Northwood Middle School. Now a brilliant young man, Dr. Jamal Adebayo, he stood on the cusp of an engineering revolution. He was a lead researcher at a prestigious AI think tank, specializing in ethical machine learning and large-scale data architecture. His work focused on creating AI systems that were not only intelligent, but also fair, transparent, and designed to augment human potential rather than replace it. His unique ability to intuit the underlying architecture of complex systems, to see the elegant shortcuts where others saw only impenetrable complexity, had made him invaluable. Jamal's journey, however, wasn't just about personal triumph. It was about paying it forward. Haunted by the memory of feeling unseen, he co-founded the Unseen Equation Foundation. Funded through his burgeoning success and generous grants from tech philanthropists, the foundation actively sought out and supported young talents from underserved communities, particularly those with unconventional learning styles or neurodivergent profiles. It offered comprehensive scholarships, provided access to specialized educational resources, and, crucially, paired these students with mentors who understood their unique ways of thinking, ensuring no quiet genius was ever overlooked again. He often spoke at conferences, sharing his story, a powerful narrative that challenged the prevailing elitism in STEM fields and championed the profound strength found in diversity of thought. Back at Northwood Middle School, Mr. Harrison, now nearing retirement, was a beloved figure. His classroom, filled with laughter and collaborative energy, was a far cry from the rigid environment of old. The wall of innovators in his room now featured dozens of success stories, but Jamal's weathered newspaper clipping remained the centerpiece. Mr. Harrison often recounted the story of Harrison's impossible problem, not as a tale of his own initial blindness, but as a humbling, transformative lesson. He had become an ardent advocate for personalized learning and an unofficial scout for the Unseen Equation Foundation, often referring his brightest, most unconventional students to Jamal's program. He had learned that true teaching wasn't about imparting knowledge, but about unlocking potential, wherever it lay hidden. One crisp autumn afternoon, Jamal returned to Northwood. He wasn't there as a former student, but as the keynote speaker for the school's newly inaugurated Future Innovators Showcase, an event funded by his foundation. The school auditorium was packed with eager students, proud parents, and beaming teachers. Mr. Harrison, his eyes shining with pride, sat in the front row. Jamal stood on the stage, a confident, articulate presence, a stark contrast to the quiet seventh grader who had once hunched in the back row. He spoke about the power of perspective, the importance of challenging assumptions, and the beauty of seeing things differently. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the audience before landing on Mr. Harrison. "I stand here today," Jamal said, his voice resonant, because once, a teacher, in a moment of challenge, he offered a small, knowing smile towards Mr. Harrison, who chuckled softly. Gave me a problem he thought was impossible. He inadvertently opened a door I didn't even know existed. He spoke of the discomfort of being misunderstood and the profound relief of finally being seen for who he truly was. And I learned that day that true intelligence isn't about fitting into a box. It's about how you solve the puzzle, no matter how unconventional your method might be. After his speech, as the excited students swarmed around him, Jamal sought out Mr. Harrison. They exchanged a silent nod, a powerful acknowledgement of a shared, transformative journey. There was no need for words. The respect was palpable. Jamal then walked through the familiar halls of Northwood, passing classrooms where new generations of students were learning. He paused outside Mr. Harrison's classroom, hearing the animated discussions within. He smiled. The future, once a terrifying blank page, was now filled with endless possibilities, illuminated by the knowledge that every mind held an unseen equation, waiting to be solved. His own journey, sparked by a teacher's misguided joke, had led him to ensure that for countless others, that equation would no longer remain unseen. If this story stirred your heart and reminded you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining our journey.